Iverson is present. Again, absent is member Zeros. I'm going to read a brief statement. Good evening. We greatly appreciate our staff and council, and if any residents are on, adapting to our teleconference format due to the COVID pandemic. Tonight's meeting will be held under Minnesota State Statute 13D-021 that permits a public body to hold a meeting via telephone or other electronic means due to the COVID-19 pandemic. For members of the public, the meeting is being live streamed on the City of Wyoming YouTube page. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The City of Wyoming meeting will be recorded as part of the public record. After each, there's only one agenda item as read and staff gives a report. That would be Mr. Erickson. From the agenda, items will be called upon for the council members' questions. We ask that you state your name, please. I don't think we have any motions tonight that we're going to have to deal with. All votes on all items will be completed by roll call to meet the standard for Minnesota Statute 13D-21. So hopefully that's clear. With that, I do want to say we need to do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. And there is a flag showing on your screen, which is behind me. So we'll start with that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America
and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So with that, we do have one item on the agenda, the 2020 Street and Project Tour Street Capital Improvement Plan. That will be Mr. Erickson who will be presenting. Mr. Erickson, are you gonna take over the screen?
I think Mr. Linwood will start things off here, and I think Mr. Linwood has control of the screen as well.
Yep, and I'll just start off for the council. Council tonight, through a lot of our discussions, we've looked at, we've continued to kind of update and evaluate our street CIP plan, and we had kind of a unanimous direction from the council to move forward with not only evaluating our current street CIP plan, to look at the potential addition of other street projects, not only for complete reconstructions, but also for mill and overlays and overlays. So with that, staff has created a packet for you tonight that goes over a lot of the different components of that. WSB has created a new updated street list, project list, which Mr. Erickson will be able to show that and show some of those videos and some of those pictures from those streets. We've attached with your packet the 2019 streets CIP plan and then our pavement management street condition index. Along with that tonight, we'd like to talk a little bit about the city's street assessment policy, and then Public Works Superintendent Almgeld would like to talk a little bit about his maintenance plan and continuing maintenance plan as we work on that. And then Assistant City Administrator Dumas has put together a survey that we'd like to get some feedback from the council on in regards to street survey conditions, walkability, safety, and other components to that. Lastly, I think what we're trying to derive tonight is try to get direction from the council in regards from what you're seeing to look at our existing CIP plan and moving forward, what our priorities are with those streets and what the city council would like to see on those. And we'll talk and get a little more feedback from staff as engineering has broken down, like I said, a lot of those different segments of streets. And from there, we would like to eventually hold another work session where we could actually give the council, based on your direction and priorities, some numbers with what that would mean to the city as far as that financial impact, including our levy and potentially any other funding mechanisms that just dependent upon how aggressive the council would want to be as we continue to do to maintenance and reconstruct and mill and overlay our streets. So with that, the first component of this discussion that we wanted to have was we just wanted to briefly give council a chance to ask questions and just evaluate some of the projects that we have upcoming in 2020. With that, I'll share my screen and we can kind of take a look at those together. What you'll see before we go through that tour is we've kind of broken down some of those and highlighted some of those bigger projects that we have upcoming. At any time, if council has any questions about these projects, by all means, please feel free to ask staff questions. The Mox Nest concept plan, that's the large development over off of Kettle River Boulevard. This is a really large development, approximately 88 acres. Right now, the concept would be for 149 residential lots, and then, excuse me, 72 single family, and then 76 multifamily, which I think the developer is still assessing what he wants to do there. Just to let the council know, he has moved forward with that EAW process. There's some different clicks statutorily that need to be done for an environmental assessment on this, and WSB is performing that due diligence and collecting data right now. And there's a tentative schedule you can see for that project. Mark, I don't know if you have any other comments on that.
No, the developer has, as you indicated, requested that we move forward with that. There's a few other agencies that are involved that we request information from. And so hopefully things stay on track, but with the situation that we all find ourselves in today, there might be some potential minor delays on that, but we're not seeing that yet. So hopefully we stay on track with the schedule as shown.
Okay. Council, any questions on that project? No? Okay, with that, I'll move on. Our 2020 lift station upgrade, as you know, through our 2018 utility and our water and sewer utility rate study, that it was determined that we want to try to be more aggressive with the rehabilitation of lift stations and panels and updating those and getting them all on our SCADA system. Mr. Almgel, do you have anything you want to add on that item? It's already been approved by the city council, but we thought we'd just try to give an actual visual of where this year's project will be. I think that'll be completed late this summer, early fall. Chuck?
Yes, it will be in the fall, and we do have all the parts purchased and the control panel ordered, and we'll be putting a 208-volt service in. XL will be to upgrade our electric service to the lift station, and that's all scheduled.
Okay. Council, any questions? No? Okay, with that, we'll keep moving. The Midco building, I know engineering right now has been, and building department has been working with Midco for this project. This was approved earlier this year. This is a 3,600 square foot data center that Midco would like to put. It's right directly just kind of southwest of the Lakes Gas building now. But we anticipate that hopefully starting early this summer, the construction of that building. Railroad Park. Kelly, do you want to kind of touch base on this one at the council, where this is at and the different things that we have going on here?
Sure. So we, at the last council meeting, the city council approved working with the to update the park plan for this. So staff is now moving forward with getting that process started. We're also in the process of working with Chisago County to get the bike trail spur for the bike repair station done. The city has submitted the application for it was a right-of-way easement that is going to be reviewed by the Chisago County Railroad Authority in May. So we're currently waiting to hear back on that.
Great, thank you. Any questions, council, on that item?
I have none.
Okay, we'll just keep ticking along. The Roars project, the Roars, this was at our last council meeting just to try to get some feedback from council and EDA if we wanted to go forward due diligence on this. There was some question at the last council meeting in regards to the 66 unit or 76 unit. It is in fact a 76 unit development that they would be proposing for this. Currently, the pro forma that they provided is being analyzed and numbers are being run, and then we'll be updating that option agreement for both our EDA and the Chisago County HRA EDA. Any questions? Okay. The preserve at Comfort Lake, it was formerly Shoreview 2. There was a joint park planning commission meeting. Kelly, do you want to fill the council on that, kind of where what happened last night at that meeting as far as The development is all approved, but there was some discussion in regards to the trails for the park session here at the lower component of that development.
I actually wasn't able to make that meeting.
Oh, okay, I apologize. I didn't know if you were or not. Last night, the developer was going to give more of an outlined plan for the different trails in this approximately 9.5 acres of this park component. So that was the joint park planning board met last night to review some of that from the developer. So the pre-construction has already been held on this development. So this we anticipate. Mark, I don't know, do you think June, July is a reasonable estimation as they begin on this, as we get the development agreement in place?
Yes, we did have the pre-construction meeting earlier, and they did indicate that they're looking at a June start. So they've been kind of holding off on a number of the development agreement things and fees until they're ready to move forward. And so they did indicate at that pre-construction meeting, like I said, early June start.
Thank you. Any questions there? Okay, move on to the Adlin subdivision. This is the development. It's approximately a 15 lot development over on Pioneer. This is, we've had continued discussions with the developer in regards to their final plat and some potential phasing is how they move through this development. Mark, I don't know if you have any updates of late on this one.
You know, we had a couple of remaining items related to drainage, and we did finally have those resolved. So I do believe we're very close on this as well. There's a couple of small remaining items that we're waiting for them to address and resubmit, and we just haven't gotten that yet. But I do believe that there's not any issue with them completing those. So I believe that should be in the very near term.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions, council? Okay. Last on the project component, as you're all well aware, the 2020 water rehabilitation. We did have a pre-construction last week with the contractor. We'll be beginning both the telecom services on the tower, beginning preparations and working with the building department for those temporary poles to place their equipment on while the rehabilitation is going on. We will have an agenda item for the council at the upcoming meeting to evaluate the color of we have some renderings of that tower, if it was the same as the existing tower. So we will have that for council to take a look at and get some feedback on at the next meeting on the 19th. And then that rehabilitation project, we anticipate that starting in June. The goal for mini storage expansion, this was 2 additional buildings on the existing lot. A 5,200 square foot and a 4,500 square foot. Essentially, one would be there, one would be there. The building department right now has received plans and they are ready to go. We anticipate as soon as those are approved. I know there was a couple corrections on and questions on the buildings, but we anticipate that project starting in June as well. Kind of outlining and starting our street tour. I don't think we have any actual pictures of this. As council is aware, the 2020 street reconstruction project that will begin in mid-June. The residents in that neighborhood have been made aware of the schedule. We will have an item for council at this next meeting for the beginning the process of the bond sale for this project. I think we've continued to have some questions in there to this project from residents, but I think it's been well received, and I think everyone in that area is looking forward to this project moving forward. So that's well overdue in that area. As we know, that isn't our best streets in those neighborhoods. Mark, I think we'll kind of switch gears here a little bit, and this is what kind of start on our 2021 East Viking Sewer Upsize project. Mark, if you want to, this is a really big project. Maybe you can give some overview on this one, and we can kind of start into our tour of this and allow the council to have questions as we start to kind of go through that project list and talk about this and work our way on East Viking and other areas. And if the council, as we talk about those areas, if there's certain areas on that project list map that you want to view or have questions, we'll go from there.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, Rob. Yes, and Rob, maybe if you can just show on the screen with your cursor there, but you know, the project really involves the upsizing of the sanitary sewer from the west there at Fallbrook and extends east all the way past 61 and all the way east to Fenwick. And that's the sanitary sewer that requires upsizing. Wasn't necessarily something that we had a deadline that needed to be completed immediately, but since MnDOT is moving forward with their improvement project to Highway 61 that extends out from 61 all the way out to Highway 35, it's certainly the time to construct that sanitary sewer at this time while the road is going to be repaired here following with next year. And so their schedule looks like they're bidding the project in August of this year for construction starting in 2021. We have plans that are quite far along. We've been coordinating with MnDOT very closely. We likely will be bidding our project in January. And so one component of this project here, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, is the East Viking component east of 61, from 61 to Fenwick. That will be excavated and completely obliterated. It's in very poor condition, but we contemplate looking at a reconstruction project there since the roadway will be destroyed in any case. The sanitary sewer, I believe, is 18 feet in depth and goes right between buildings. Curb is in bad condition. The sidewalk would likely need being replaced as well. And so it's pretty involved with extending that sanitary sewer through that stretch, not to mention the traffic control component of this, closing down one of our main access points to the freeway. And so there has been a lot of coordination, but there will be a lot of communication moving forward as well. And so as we get closer to finalizing plans and have things fully understood with MnDOT, there'll be likely another work session just to discuss this project alone and how that process works. We have that sanitary sewer that would really tear up the roadway, and we need to discuss, is that a public improvement process where there would be assessments as well? And so we need to kind of gather ourselves on that, understand it a little bit more fully, and then we'll be presenting that to the city council for further discussion. Is that kind of the idea, Rob? You wanted just a brief
Yeah,
overview
I
of
think so.
what's
I
coming?
think and I think we've had discussion with the council's aware of this, and we've know that it went back a year based on originally we thought it was gonna be 20, now it's 21. But I think just to keep everyone aware of it, as Mark said, this is gonna be probably not a lot of fun as far as the detours are gonna be fairly significant on this, not alone, just it's a big project. So
I have a question. Mark, you talked about assessing.
Well, I guess there's a question related to that. There's certainly the roadway, certainly Highway 61 that extends between County Road 30 and 35, the east-west portion there. There would not be assessments on that. And there wouldn't be assessments for the sanitary sewer. But since we are improving the local roadway, East Viking, because the sanitary sewer is going through there, there's a question whether or not we would want to move forward with assessments for the street improvements. And it's not advocating one way or another, but I think it's a question that needs to be answered as we progress forward with final design and exactly what those improvements consist of. And typically when we have made improvements to local roadways, that has involved assessments.
Okay, and how far back would that go? I mean, I would assume the Brenda's, the chiropractic, the bank, where does that end on the east side?
Yeah, so that would just be those first two blocks, the properties adjacent there. And so the question is, which, our policy, and certainly it's provides guidance, but those that, it's typically been assessed, those that have direct access. And so that would be a part of that, that would be evaluated there as well.
Okay, so that would be from East Viking to what, the Methodist Church? Or am I going the wrong way?
to Fenwick, essentially, right, from Fallbrook to Fenwick. So Fenwick would be the cutoff.
Okay.
That won't be very long when we come back and have that discussion. We'll need to, we're certainly lagging behind MnDOT's schedule. We're not going to be bidding this in August. It will be a 2021 project. And so we would like to bid that, late 2020 or early 2021. And so we'll need to discuss that and, really determine how we plan to move forward. And is the project greater than that? Is it beyond that? And so we can discuss that as part of our roads that we've identified that are potential candidates for capital improvements planning. And so we'll highlight that, but certainly the first two blocks will require reconstruction, just from the simple fact that the sanitary sewer construction will require that they be reconstructed.
Any other questions on that project? No. Okay, Mark, with that, maybe we can take a look and maybe even start on East Viking, but I'm just gonna, if the council wants to take a look, we gave you maybe just do a quick overview of our CIP plan before Mark starts that discussion on that. And this was our last year, our 2019, that we've been kind of keeping track. And you can see some of the roads on this. Streets have been completed. You can see Fairview Boulevard's been completed. Pioneer Road and 260th have been completed. Indian Trail. And then you can see yellow over here that the 2020 project, that's obviously commencing here shortly. So it kind of gives an idea to council what we had prioritized and what's upcoming. You can see some areas up on 277. Some of this areas back on Foxborough Lane and Glen Oak, and some of these neighborhoods back in this area. And then on the southernmost part of the city, the Greenway Avenue stretch down here, and then Greenway Road were other ones that we had looked at as potential projects. So I think that's just for reference in regards to where we've been, more or less. And then WSB, as you can see, this new one, and Mark, maybe you can go through a little bit as far as the different the different symbols up here, the index for the different components that you've identified, what might be potential projects for these streets.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Linwood. Before you scroll down, yeah, thank you. So we've identified throughout the community roadways that need various improvements, and we've coordinated that effort with Mr. Almgeld. He's certainly has intimate knowledge of the roadways, and we've coordinated that effort and developed really a list of roadways that we feel are needing improvement. We haven't prioritized them. It's part of the meeting that we wanted to discuss that this evening. But we have identified a multitude of different types of improvement projects as well. We've talked in the past about, reconstructing roadways. We have a lot of roadways that were in quite poor condition and we're beyond any other type of repairs other than reconstruction. So we've been tackling those. However, we have a number of other types of improvements that we consider, and those are reclaim and mill and overlay type improvements, and overlays for that matter. And so we have looked at and incorporated a number of projects similar to what we've done here with the last year's project by the hospital there on Fairview Avenue. We had a reclaim type project, and so you certainly get a little bit further with your funds on those type of improvements. All projects just aren't good candidates for that, but we have identified those, and you can see the red are identified as reconstruction type projects, and the orange color is the reclaim type of improvements. And then we also have the yellow, which are urban type, meaning they have curb and gutter of some fashion there, and those are identified as reconstruct there as well. And then in blue we have identified mill and overlay. And then there's also urban reclaim, where we're reclaiming where there is curb and gutter as well, at least in some of those areas. And so we've tried to break that out with various types of improvements that we feel are appropriate. And so you can see the candidates there. Some are holdovers from the last map that just haven't been completed yet. And then we also have identified a lot of other candidates out there that require improvement. And so maybe I'll just start with the reconstruction roadways and just kind of tackle them by area. The east side of Polaris there on East Viking Boulevard, and we can certainly share photos, but we've identified that as a reconstruction project. It is in very poor condition. I know Public Works staff has spent an awful lot of time on that. And Chuck, maybe if you're if you're available here to just make a comment on the effort that you put in on East Viking Boulevard and why we're recommending a reconstruction there, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and south of the, or excuse me, east of the gate there, we get a lot of complaints And so we went out there and started, and for the whole of East Viking, we have like 80% of the road done as of today, which is potholing. And we have spent with labor and 18 tons of mix, $7,777 so far. And we're 80% done with potholing, just to give you a kind of a number of an 18 tons of asphalt, how many holes there are, the condition of it. And then we also, replaced dug that one frost boil out last year, but there's a few more and on east of the gate. And so, yeah, it's in bad shape.
Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, and you can see the other segment of East Viking that we've identified, and half of the roadway is in much better condition than the other half, and that coincides with the area that was repaved after they constructed some water main. The curbs on both sides are in very poor condition, and we did just recently put down a patch. I think it was last year, part of the Fairview project, that we did install. I think a $40,000 patch on a segment of road there, and so that roadway, the first 2 blocks that we just talked about with the sanitary sewer upsizing project would require reconstruction. There's the other segments that persist that are not in great condition. That would be that urban section that goes all the way down towards Glen Oak, and then the portion that the remaining portion east out to Polaris would be more of a reclamation type improvement project. The roadway has just seen its life. It's beyond a mill and overlay, and so there's certainly needs there. We just need to work through with council to identify the priorities throughout the community. Maybe Rob, instead, maybe I'll just work north to south on this. Hillcrest is the furthest north roadway, and again, we'll certainly share photos. I know we've always done a road tour in a bus, and we've driven around and we've identified and been able to share that. We have gone through and used our 360 camera, similar to what you may see on a Google car, identifying or going through a community and updating their Google Maps. We've done that similarly with our own equipment, and we've gone through and taken 360-degree videos of everything, and we've also generated photos from those videos that we can certainly share with you and kind of show what those distresses are. And so we'll do that following this portion of the presentation. But Hillcrest is one that does have concrete curb and gutter. It is in very poor condition. A lot of the surface, we're seeing some of the issues that we see on a lot of our roadways with the delamination, with the chip sealing. There's a lot of other types of distresses there, but we feel that mill and overlay would certainly rectify a lot of those issues that we're seeing out there. 287th Street, which you can see just on the east side of 61, is extremely rough when you drive that. I've never been down a road quite as rough, and there's not necessarily quite the potholes and things, but something happened with that pavement. Boy, is it extremely rough as you extend down that. Now, that certainly might be a little bit lower priority just based on the volume of residents that use that, but certainly is a candidate that would require some improvements there. And I think similarly, as you look at 277th, Fountain, East Viking Lane, those are all rural roadways that would just require a reclamation type improvement where they grind up the asphalt, leave the base in place, and just repave the existing roadway. So again, a little bit less expensive than a reconstruction. And one of the projects that we feel is really important, well, we certainly have a holdover project, and that's on Forley and Foxborough and the 267th and 266th area. A lot of drainage issues. The roadway condition is quite poor, and so we're certainly interested in looking at that a little bit closer to see where council lies with that. But I know that we've seen a lot and heard a lot from residents about the condition there and wondering where they're at on the CIP and wanting to see some improvements made there. So that's certainly probably one that's at least near the top, at least certainly in the top half of the candidates. Fallbrook Avenue there in the magenta is one that is in really poor condition. It is a state aid route, And so we'd like to share some photos and video of that as well, but that's certainly another candidate that we feel would rank pretty highly. The Thornbeck Ponds neighborhood is one in which we see a lot of issues. We think that certainly can be rectified with a mill and overlay, but we see a lot of the issues that we feel are likely from that chip seal product, where we see a lot of failures throughout the metro area, where you get these real shallow potholes, and there's extremely difficult to just patch those. They don't stay in place. I know Mr. Almjad had ordered a high flow planer to help allow some of the patching on these situations, but the extent of the potholes that we see there is extreme. And we certainly think a mill and overlay project in that neighborhood would be a great candidate. Similar to the Grizzly Court, I think it's the Hawk Meadows development to the south there in blue. That's another one that would require a mill and overlay. There's curb and gutter throughout, but we're seeing a lot of those pavement issues there as well. Just to the north there on Goodwin, 255th, 259th, Grafton, there's a lot of areas that are urban there. We're looking at a reclamation project, but there might certainly be more of a reconstruction type improvement there due to the fact that there are curb and gutters, there might be some storm sewer, there are some pavement underlying issues underneath the roadway that's causing some of the distresses. And so that we're evaluating whether that's a reclamation or a reconstruction project. If it were a reconstruction project, it would likely include concrete curb and gutter rather than asphalt curb and gutter. But further discussion would need to take place on that. West Comfort Drive is another roadway that is in just terrible condition. We've known that, we've monitored it, we've looked at it. It's continuing to deteriorate. There's a gap that's actually good condition there, and that happens to be where the most recent development had occurred there with the Woods of Comfort Lake. But on either sides of that development, the roadway is in very poor condition. And again, we feel a rural reclamation type improvement project would rectify that. Where the cursor is there, East Comfort is a stretch of roadway that is, again, in very poor condition. There's also some gravel stretches of roadway there that makes it difficult for public works staff to get there and maintain those. But there might be a little history on why those aren't paved, and so we might want to discuss that. But the pavement portion is identified in red, and that's certainly one that would need reconstruction beyond just an overlay or mill and overlay or reclamation. It would likely need some subgrade corrections. And then at the very south end here, we have Greenway Avenue that actually extends down towards North Shore Trail. There's a short section that is from City of Forest Lake. That also would likely require reconstruction. You'll see some photos of the extent of patching that's occurred over the years. And that's something that certainly we've had an awful lot of complaints on as well. Mr. Linwood, I don't know if you want to get into any discussion about that last stretch that might actually extend down into North Shore or not, but there might be an opportunity that we coordinate an effort there with Forest Lake to make sure that that entire stretch is completed with that project. And there might be some creating of some responsibilities on other shared roadways.
Right. I certainly think so. I think it's an opportunity. Their section isn't quite as bad as ours, but I think I know that the City of Forest Lake has asked previous years if we have any plans to do anything with that road previously. So I think they would be in favor of that, and I think a willing partner on that. I think Mr. Almgeld, I think you've had some discussions with their public works superintendent in regards to some of those shared streets as well.
Yes, Rob, we had some discussions on if we paved that part and took it over, maybe we could swap it with some other little stuff. I think it was on, was it 245th area? Or is that little segment of road? Or is it 240th?
I think it was 240th, yeah, where we share the border.
And it's about the same size, and we're wondering if we could, if they maintained that, they already did half of it, 240th. We would do Greenway. Just an idea to kind of clean up the little areas that it's not a project for another city.
So more to come on that. Certainly not something that we need to discuss or really come to any conclusion this evening, but just know that there's an opportunity there that we wouldn't leave a small segment there uncompleted. We'd have discussions with Forest Lake about trying to get that portion included. And then the very southwest corner, there's an opportunity there for mill and overlay throughout that neighborhood there as well. So you can see the extent of roadways that have issues. There's certainly a lot of other roadways that that may require additional improvements as well. That's not on the list, but I think we should certainly be proud of the fact in recent years we've knocked off an awful lot of roadway improvement projects, whether it's Goodview, Greenway, Pioneer, 245th and Fond and Fairview. I mean, there's been a lot of projects, not to mention our 2015 project where we took about 6 years or 6 miles of roadways and improved those. And so certainly should be able to feel proud of the effort that's gone into improving the roadways, but you can see that there's a little bit of work left to do. We have quite a few roadways that I don't know that you could certainly argue that all of these, you know, could certainly be improved right now, right? That they're in a condition that would warrant work. And so these likely will not be completed in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, there's certainly not enough funds that we have available to us to complete these in that 5 to 10 year range. And so we'll need to discuss, you know, prioritizing these improvements. And that's really where we'd like to go with, you know, the next portion of the discussion. And certainly, I think, you know, before we get there, Rob, I'm not sure, maybe we want to share some of the photos, some of the videos. If there's segments in particular that the council would like to see, we can certainly go through all of them if you'd like. But we're certainly prepared to kind of show the results of what we would have normally seen on the bus tour.
I think that's appropriate, Mark. And council, is there anywhere that any requests on any of the particular streets, or maybe we can just try to take some highlights and go and start going through them?
This is Mayor Iverson. I don't have any preference.
Why don't we start with some of the photos, Rob? I think I've just taken, you know, 1 or 2 photos from each segment, and we can start there. And then maybe I'll highlight maybe a couple of maybe East Viking, east of Polaris, Fallbrook Avenue, north of Fairview Hospital. There's a number of them that I think are worthy of just taking a look at the video. They're short segments. They're, you know, when we drove them pretty quickly so that we didn't have, you know, really long videos that would bore you to death. But I think there's certainly worthwhile to look at a few of them. Maybe we just take a look at each photo, Rob, that I had sent you. They're labeled by street name, and we can just quick zoom in on a few of the areas and take a look at that.
That sounds good. Mark, did you want to share those, or do you want me to go through and share those?
I certainly can. If you'd like to unshare your screen, I'll share mine, and we can do that.
Okay, that'd be great.
All right, everybody able to see that screen?
Yes.
All right, great.
Yep.
All right, I'll just quick highlight. Here's 259th Street. And when you look at this, you're seeing all directions at one time with the 360-degree camera. So we just need to zoom in just a little bit, and you'll be able to see. I'll try to get past the hood of the car here just so we can see here. And you can see just the extent of the potholes and the patching that Public Works has been required to do. And this is extensive, right? And this is certainly an awful lot of work. This is an area that we've identified as a mill and overlay. These potholes are shallow, would be able to be removed with a mill and overlay type improvement and resurfaced. There's a number of other improvements that go along with the mill and overlay project. You know, there might be work to catch basins and manholes and things like that that we want to take care of while we're there. But for the most part, it's, you know, it's grinding off that top layer of asphalt and replacing it. And so it's much less expensive than a reconstruction, but it corrects all these issues that you're seeing with the roadway. All right, let me see if I can. (264th Street). This is coming east on Fallbrook, just east of Fallbrook, looking towards, I believe that's Barry's garage, if I'm not mistaken. And you just wanted to highlight this again. This would be likely tied into a project that would include Fallbrook, but you can see the condition of the roadway again. Patching, longitudinal cracks, transverse cracks. There's areas that are alligator cracking, and just a not a very good condition roadway there. Um, 277th, which is north of town there. You can see all the cracks. A lot of them are covered up, but there's cracks in every direction on these. You can see the old the old crack filling and seal coating that had occurred that covered up a lot of it, but there's a lot of additional cracks that have occurred, and this would be another candidate for a rural reclamation type improvement project. 287th is very similar. I'll maybe just skip that just to save a little bit of time. East Viking here is actually the stretch here that you can see that the patch was completed in last year. It's in good condition. We all know the remaining portion of the condition of the roadway. We get an awful lot of complaints, have people come into city council meetings and complain about that. I did reference earlier that the east side of the roadway is in much better condition than, I'm sorry, the south side of the roadway is in much better condition than the north side of the roadway. However, the curb never was replaced. It's in very poor condition as well. We'd want to look at types of improvements on this stretch. There's a potential that we could certainly narrow this roadway up considerably. You can see the width as it was a former county road. It's an opportunity that we could look at to narrow that roadway up, minimize costs, and give people back some of their yards as well. So that's something that we could look at and consider in the future as well. And this is Chuck's favorite stretch. Well, maybe not. I may have mislabeled this one. I'm sorry, this is East Viking there as well. This is the stretch here again, where this side of the roadway is not terrible. You can see the patching of the curb that's been taking place, but a lot of patching on the roadway there as well, beyond what we did with the large scale patch. And here's the portion east of Polaris. This was Chuck's favorite portion. I'm not sure. I think this was driven last Friday, Thursday or Friday. I think it was Thursday or Friday of last week, and it sounds like Chuck's done a lot more patching since then, but certainly the roadway is in terrible condition. Beyond, you can see the alligator cracking. This is all going to break up next as well, and so it's just a roadway that's in a lot of disrepair. I'm not sure how far we can see down as zooming in here. The quality gets a little bit grainier as we go up, but it doesn't get any better. So it's in pretty poor condition overall. That would require likely some coordination with Chisago City. I know their section of roadway is in very poor condition as well. Looking at Fallbrook, again, this is the rural section there. We're looking at Hallberg in the background there, but you can see the condition of the roadway is just terrible. There's certainly a lot of patching that could take place, that has taken place, and Chuck has only got so many men, and you can see the amount of time and material that he's putting in already, and there's just so much, so much patching that occurs. He's talking a little bit about the effort and the time and manpower that goes into that. It's just an awful lot. We can pan around and look at any direction you want. You can look behind us here as well, and the roadway is just not in any better direction, any direction we look. So
Mr. Erickson, this is Lisa Iverson. Just a question on Fallbrook and with Rosenbauer back there and the amount of semi trucks. Do we have to have a different, do we have to build that road a little bit differently to accommodate for the fire trucks and the semi trucks that come and deliver product?
yeah, that's a great question. And so, yeah, we typically do look at pavement design with all of our projects. And so we're seeing certainly a larger increase in volume of large trucks. And so when we look at that, there's various components to a pavement design that does evaluate the type of vehicles that utilize the roadway and the percentage of those vehicles that utilize the roadway. And so, yes, there would be an increased section from what we typically see on our roadway improvement projects there. So great question.
Thank you.
Again, you can see here, this is a lot where we run into a lot of these issues where we have a lot of these shallow potholes. They're occurring all over the place. I know Public Works has done some patching, you can see here, but they're popping up all over the place. And what we've seen a lot of our communities do is have good success with mill and overlay improvements. And so they're grinding off that top layer. These potholes do not extend beyond that. And so we're able to correct the driving surface there. And so it's certainly an area here that we're looking at that We typically see these type of mill and overlay improvements at this stage of a pavement's life anyway, before it gets to a more of a type of a reconstruction type project. We can preserve the life of the roadway by doing these mill and overlays. And so, not to mention, is the roadway in poor condition, we also like to do that at this stage of a pavement's life to extend it beyond where we get into the more expensive fixes. We talked a little bit about that, just generally that whole Forley and Fox Hill area, and you can just see the, the roadways here are, again, in quite poor condition. The edges are broken up. There's potholes and patches and things all over the place. And so these are types of improvement that we've done with the 2015 project. Those were really essentially a reclamation type improvement. We did not add curb and gutter. It's a sandier area of the community. If there are drainage improvements, we know that that those are hard to correct without curb and gutter. And so we know we're feeling that with a couple of areas that just haven't been corrected. They still have standing water seasonally that didn't get corrected. But our choices that we made earlier on just to save the expense. But certainly their roadways are still performing quite well, and we expect them to in the future with that project as well. Good one, 255th area. Looks like Public Works had been out here already. You can see the extent of the patching that we see throughout. Again, pretty extensive. It's kind of representative of the area that we're seeing there. You can and around, and you can see behind us as well that it's the same. I'll take a look one more here. You can see the patching again, the potholes. If you look real close, you can get in and see all the cracks throughout the pavement in every direction. And so we're seeing quite a few issues there as well. I'll just jump to West Comfort Drive. West Comfort, this is coming from the 260th area. You can see here, and I'll zoom in, you can see the condition of the roadway. There's not a pavement piece greater than about 6 inches by 6 inches in a lot of these areas. It's just starting to pop out. It's breaking up. We've got potholes on potholes, and it's just one project again that a rural reclamation type project would alleviate. I should go back to one. I skipped a couple here, but I think Greenway south of 8 is another good candidate to look at. This is coming towards Highway 8. You can see fresh potholes, older potholes, patching all over the place. And so we just know that this is a project that might require just the extent of the patching. We do some soil borings, but that might be something we look at, either a reclamation type project or a reconstruction type project. And I'll just maybe I'll take a couple of videos here too, and just do a quick. Oh, Rob, I might need to turn back to you. It was working for me here when we met earlier.
Okay, let me give me one
Actually,
second.
we're voting on 287th right now. Not sure what the delay was there, but that's not. It's opening them out of order here. Okay, this is West Comfort, I believe, or East Comfort. Where are we at? This is 260th coming up. So all right, so this is let me see here. Here we go. Now we're
Mark, I don't know if you have it shared on your other, maybe on the other screen. Is it not on?
Yeah, Rob, I'm having a little bit of difficulty here. I clicked too many times and it's opening them all at once. Can I just relieve, stop the share and you show that on yours?
Let me try to get it up on mine. Give me 1 second, Mark.
All right. All right, I'm back up and running. It just happened to open up every one that I clicked on. I wasn't patient enough apparently, and so I have a lot of them running here. But you can see the condition of the roadway with the patches. I can pan over here a little bit better to get us in the right stretch of the roadway. Is everybody able to see this now?
Yep.
In some ways, this is just as easy as riding in the bus, right?
Pretty good.
Mr. Erickson, it's probably a little more fun when we're all together, though.
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't, unless the council has a desire to see any other roadways, we probably can continue to move forward. But I, know that we do have these, and if you'd like to see them, I certainly can go through and look at any additional ones you'd like to see. I'll just let this one complete. I think this is one of Chuck's favorite, it looks like.
Yeah, it's a lot of blacktop on that one.
Right.
Mr. Amjad, what would you say, how many hours have you spent out there with staff on that road? If you had to guess.
I only like timed one, and that was East Viking, and we spent 1 week, so for 5 days, 4 employees, and we got 80% of the road done. And so that's like 1.5 miles of road. So yeah, so that's how much we've, we timed that one just to see how long it takes. And that's with 20 tons of mix, so they're doing like 4 tons a day.
Thank you.
All right. I think, does anybody want, this is one of the longer stretches, but if anybody has a segment of road they'd like to see, that's great. Otherwise, I can stop sharing, and Mr. Linwood can continue on to kind of the next portion of the discussion.
Sure. Anything else, council, that anyone wants to take a look at? Are we okay? We can continue on?
I'm okay.
Okay. Okay. I think I'm gonna, excuse me 1 second here. I'm just bringing my screen back up here. We don't necessarily need a picture of this, but I think the other portion that staff wanted to talk about tonight was we look at some of these different processes for these streets. Currently, our assessment policy in regards for non-accessible items. One of those that we kind of tried to identify, and I apologize, I had a typo on that the first time it was sent out, but it's not accessible right now is bituminous overlays. So this is something that as we look at and just the pure scale amount of projects that we want to do, this might be something that might be a discussion that may become, in fact, an accessible component to our street CIP plan. And I think this is something that we wanted to get some feedback from council tonight and see what their thoughts were in regards to those bituminous overlays. If they really had strong feelings that that's a non-accessible component. Mark and I had some discussion about this. I think for the most part, Mark, that most communities that those bituminous overlays not always are usually an accessible component. Would that be correct? I mean,
there's certainly exceptions to that, but yeah, I think I would say the majority of communities do assess for those mill and overlay type improvement projects. I think we talked a little bit about, the fact that if we didn't assess that, we might have everybody request just mill and overlay projects, right? And get 10 years out of it than have it mill and overlay again and a mill and overlay again. And so I think there's certainly merit to that, but I think certainly staff wanted to have that discussion with council to see where you stood with that and make sure that we are moving forward accordingly. We haven't had the mill and overlay type improvements. And so if there's an adjustment to that assessment policy, I think now would be the time to do that before we start implementing these type of improvements.
Okay, so I'll call on each council member, just kind of get an input or what they think. Member Luger?
How quickly do we need to decide this? Is it like, is that something that we need to decide tonight?
No, I don't think it's anything that we have to do just instantaneously. I don't think we're trying to make council have a decision on this. And I think we wanted some feedback for it as we continue to prioritize and plan these streets and try to pull numbers together. That's going to be a component to this. So I don't think we need to make the change immediately, but I think moving forward, it's something as we look at the life of these. But I think just some general feedback. I don't think it has to be absolutes. If council wants to digest that a little more tonight, if you don't have a real strong feeling, or we don't need any absolute tonight from anyone.
Okay, I'm gonna go. All right, I'm gonna ask Member Yeager.
Well, when we started the road projects, it was, we told that the roads were 20 years lifespan with mill and overlays at 10 years. For those roads that we've reconstructed, if they require a mill and overlay at 10 years, the first road projects that have just finished paying off their assessment for their reconstruction and now will be assessed again for a mill and overlay. When we went to 15-year bonds, some people may not have finished paying off the 15-year assessment before going into a mill and overlay assessment.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to have any roadways that will likely be mill and overlaid within 15 years. In any case, I don't think I don't think we're going to have everything on that map that we've highlighted to be able to be completed in 10 years even, right? And so I think we're certainly beyond the 10 years, and I think our roadways will certainly, the ones that we're reconstructing, will last much longer than 20 years, 30, 40 years. But there will be some intermediate improvements that will be required, whether that's pavement preservation projects, crack filling, seal coating, things of that nature. And then also, mill and overlays maybe at that 15 or 20-year mark is what we would likely see, probably closer to that 20-year mark. But that's all going to depend on how the pavements continue to perform. And so I think that it's certainly a valid point to bring up, but I don't think we'll probably be seeing any, coming back to any projects within that 10 to 15-year window for sure.
Then would we have to change page 4 on the street assessment policy where it talks about everything is good for 20 years? Should we extend that to 30 or 40 years based on what you just said?
Well, I think that 20 years likely refers to maybe when we come back and do like a mill and overlay, but we certainly can review that and update that if we think we want to do that.
Actually, it doesn't refer to a mill and overlay. It says the life expectancy or service life for most street improvements, including concrete curb gutter, sidewalk trails, and storm sewer, is 20 years.
Yeah, I'd like to extend that beyond 20 years. I'm very confident that we can do that. For the full life of the pavement, yes.
I think that makes sense. I don't think any of our projects are going to be with the compaction and materials. I think, Mark, that'd be maybe even 30. Is that maybe realistic on that?
Yeah, I think 30 is certainly a better number. I mean, there will be those intermediate improvements, whether it's a mill and overlay or things like that, that are required to get it to that point. But yes, I'm comfortable extending that.
Yeah, I'd like to see the street assessment policy revised, at least to extend those lifespans.
Yeah, and as Rob mentioned, I don't think we don't want to put anybody on the spot. We were just providing, some thoughts on the assessment policy. And our road tours never have involved, decision making or anything like that. We're not asking that this evening, but we wanted to get at least some thoughts out in front of you. We'll have a follow-up. It's nice to get some feedback on the roadways and prioritization so that we can take that next step and looking at, and we have identified costs for most of these areas and project areas. We kind of need to lump them together, but we really need to identify what the priorities are, and then we can kind of work on a financial model to see what we can tackle and when. And so I think that's important for us to hear the priorities, but just to hear feedback on the assessment policy, any initial thoughts. We're not asking for any answers or anything like that this evening.
Okay, Member Schilling?
I know the road that I live on currently is just about 20 years, and you had that on your schedule for the mill and overlay. So based on all the discussions, I think we should make that change in the documentation, but that's pretty much all I have at this point.
All right, my only thought where it says 20 years, I don't want us to, I guess, language wise, I don't want people to come back and say, here's the document that you said 30 years and it's only been 20. I think we need to be very careful with a finite number, or a definite number that says X amount of years. I think it needs to be between this and this or something like that, so we don't, I don't know. I'm kind of stuck on that definite year point because we don't know, and other
Right.
projects could come out, other, I don't know, different materials and stuff which could extend it. There could have been something bad in a road that was done. And so I just kind of hate to do a set number, but I do think that it does need to be updated. So in terms of assessments, I really kind of want to see the numbers. I think we all have a really good idea what a complete reconstruction costs. I think we all have been dealing with that for the last 5 years or 6 years. Mill and overlay and the new urban one, you know, not knowing exactly what that's going to cost or what that looks like. And then typically, usually in an urban, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a lot less people to pay to spread out those payments on those streets. So I think we also need to be very careful of that. And then what do we do to kind of help with our, in the future, build up our road funds?
Great comments, and I certainly can come back with you. Like I mentioned, we did prepare some really high-level estimates for each of the project areas, and we can look at what assessments, what kind of assessment impact would be on these mill and overlays, if that's information, which I completely agree with. I think that's really relevant information to share to see what are the impacts of these assessments for a mill and overlay project. Is it, you know, we know the reconstruction projects have been, you know, $6,000+, and you know, maybe a mill and overlay project is, you know, 1,500 or something, and that might be relevant to your decision making. And so we'll be prepared at our next work session where we bring back more materials to discuss that further.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Erickson, Councilmember Schilling here. I actually agree with that, and then I also agree with Mayor. I would like to, you know, don't put a set time on it, because we all know how set language turns into. You get a gentleman or a person that comes in and says, well, you said this is going to last for 30, it's been 25, I want my money back.
Great.
All right. If there is no more discussion on that, Rob, do you want to move on from there?
We can, yeah, if that gives us some good direction, and I think be able to break down some of those costs, and council can think about that too a little more, staff, as we evaluate some of those costs and those considerations that you all just made. We certainly can. I think, Mark, are you comfortable with the feedback we got? I think I am.
Yeah, I think I am. I think it would be nice maybe just to hear a little bit of feedback on the priorities of what the council sees or hears from the community on what roadways seem to be at the top of the list. And so we can start, you know, developing a little bit more of a financial plan surrounding improvements to those roadways to see how far the money that we currently have will go.
Okay, I'll start again, round robin here. Let's start with Member Luker.
In terms of prioritizing roads,
Yes.
And I can bring,
I mean, I think some of those roads that are like, say, behind Wyoming Drug that were just, or around it, that weren't included in the first round of roads, like 266th and 267th, which we did not see pictures for, have been awful. I mean, and they're in the presentation here, but we just didn't see pictures of them. They're really bad. It's painful to bike over. It's painful to drive over. I definitely, and I think that because they're closer to those downtown businesses, it would be a good idea to, like, I feel like those would be a priority.
those do have some drainage issues there as well that I know Public Works deals with on an annual basis. And so we certainly feel that those roadways are in poor condition, as well as having drainage concerns there as well that we'd like to get rectified. So those, I think staff would agree that those are roadways that we certainly hear a lot of complaints from.
We do. I would agree with that, Mark, that we do. Those are some roads that we do receive a lot of, not that we don't have complaints throughout the city, but those are some of the more vocal complaints back in that area.
Okay, Member Schilling?
I guess I agree with staff's assessment on importance and in priority because they're out on them every day, especially on the public works side. I mean, when I look at this proposed and what the scheduled is, I think it matches pretty well compared to the way when I tool around town and look at things when, you know, we're out walking or even biking. So I don't have anything that I've had a complaint on, honestly, except for the road we live on. But the road we live on is 20 years old and it's, you know, going to take some patching for a few more years, especially. So.
Okay, Member Yeager?
Can we do reconstruction and reclamation in the same project?
You know, you can, it gets very difficult. We saw that a little bit with commercial properties and mixing commercial and residential properties in the assessment methodology. You certainly can. We can break up areas and break up costs and do different types of improvements and different types of assessments. The assessment rate, I think, would need to be different for areas that are reconstructed versus those that are reclaimed. And so I generally like to keep the same types of improvements together, but that's not to say that they can't be intermingled. But I think it might be a little bit cleaner when you have some people saying, well, how come their assessment is, you know, a fraction of mine because, you know, they're getting a mill and overlay versus an improvement project. I think the scale and size of the projects that we have here, I don't know if they can't be standalone projects where they can't necessarily stand alone rather than be intermixed, but they certainly can be.
All right, well, if you would rather keep reclamations and reconstruction separate, then it looks like the choice is a big reclamation project or hitting all the red areas that need reconstruction in the project. Kind of like an either or.
Yeah, I think, you know, the cost of these projects are pretty significant when you look at, you know, just the scale of this here, right? We had multi-million-dollar project here. And so we start looking at these areas and we're looking at, you know, millions of dollars in each area. So I think they are standalone projects and I don't know that they need to be mixed. We're looking at you know, potentially a large mill and overlay project, which certainly your money is going to go a lot further, but it's a substantial project just as it stands. And, you know, economies of scale, and we want to tackle quite a few. We might be able to, you know, lump this project and this project together and tackle those in one construction season if you're inclined. But I think it's a little bit easier for assessment wise when you're looking at costs. We can mix them together. I'm not saying that we can't, but sometimes it's a little bit cleaner and easier for constituents or residents to understand how costs are broken up.
Okay, well, I wasn't asking the second question wasn't about mixing them together.
Oh,
Second question was more about, you have the red areas, so, you know, doing East Viking in the middle of town, East Viking, east of Polaris, East Comfort Drive. I can't see on here where there's another red, if there's another red in there anywhere.
I don't think so.
Or that Greenway.
Yeah, Greenway.
But lumping those four segments together as one project, or doing as the other council members suggesting, doing the big reclamation project around Forley. Oh, that's a little small, 267th and 6th.
6th and 7th.
Yeah. And then if you were to do one big reclamation, thank you, one big reclamation project, how much can you get in one shot?
oh,
Do
I
you
mean,
just
with the reclamation project,
stop at
knock out just
Forley
all
and
of them
Finley and that? Or can you add in up on Fountain Avenue or add in down on Grafton and Goodwin.
You could lump in any project you'd like. It's not uncommon for a community to have a program where they tackle various portions of the community in the same project. And so that's common. We certainly could do that.
So I think that the question would be, for me, whether to finish up all the reconstruction projects or do a big reclamation project.
Okay, so this is Mayor Iverson. I guess here is my thoughts or my concerns. All the projects we have done thus far have been major reconstruction, and there are quite a few that we have on this list. But at the same time, we have many neighborhoods that are deteriorating very quickly that could just use that less expensive mill and overlay. So, I'm wondering, do we do now the next year would be more of a mill and overlay and we get into our neighborhoods, unless, and Mr. Elmjeld, you will probably know better than all of us, the ones that are due for complete reconstruction, such as by Polaris or down in Viking, does that have to get done right away? Is there a way to be able to do, every other year in terms of which type of project we do? Because I am concerned as these neighborhoods are aging. Mine is 27 or 28 years, I think. Dennis, Member Schilling, I want to say yours is 2025, right in there. And then Member Luger, I think yours is probably the oldest neighborhood that didn't get done in that 2015 project. So how do we balance out our needs? We know we need to do a complete reconstruct on many, but how do we balance out those needs for the neighborhoods before they start getting so bad they become complete reconstruct as well? So, if there's a way, Mr. Erickson, to kind of a plan B maybe, or a plan C, just to kind of look at what would that look like in every other year, switching those out or doing one versus, having two going at one time. So we can kind of give the people in neighborhoods a little bit of hope on some of these roads.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think staff can come back with some ideas. I know Mr. Elmjud is very aware of the condition of the roadways and what might be the best fix. And so we can come back with staff's recommendation. I think they seem to be aligning with what council is seeing as well. We can come back with some recommendations based on the available funding that we have and what could be tackled when. I do think it's probably important to start looking at some of these type of improvements that consist of a mill and overlay type project that would prevent these pavements from getting in worse condition that requires more expensive fixes. And so I think that's certainly a valid point that we don't want to close our eyes to that. I think that's important that we do address those before they get worse. And frankly, I mentioned this to Mr. Linwood. We have a project list here that, based on funding that we have currently, is not going to be completed within the next 10 years. I'm doubtful anyway. It's certainly a lot. It's expensive to fix all of these roadways that are shown. And we have, a lot of roadways that are going to be following that in 10 years. That list isn't going to go away. These aren't our only bad roadways. There's going to be a lot more that, as those roadways continue to deteriorate, they'll be added to the list as well. And so I think it's a never-ending battle, right? And so I just wanted to throw that out there, that I think funding is obviously going to be a limiting factor on what we can get completed.
I have a question. When we did the road project in 2015, when do those bonds mature and that money is available to do a project?
I think those were 10 years. I'd have to double check that, Councilmember Yeager, but I believe that those were 10-year bonds.
Yeah, I believe they were.
I'll confirm that.
I mean, I was like, is it 16 or 17 where we don't have to pay them again?
I can, give me one moment. I can look that up and and give you an answer.
Yeah, 26 and 27.
Those were 10-year bonds, so 2026.
Okay.
So I believe, Mr. Linwood, correct me if I'm wrong, but as we look at the cost of these improvements and as we pull together a 5-year capital improvements plan, I believe that's going to be a component, right? Or a 5 or 10-year capital improvement plan. That's going to be a component that's evaluated, the financials, how that works and what comes off, what debt will be relieved, right? Or retired.
Correct. And I think that's, council's aware that we did do the debt model with Springstead. So that's a living document, and we'll, as we, get this feedback from council tonight, as we look at these potential mill and overlays in some of these neighborhoods and how that mixes in, that's something that we'll be able to look at those costs and look at our overall financial analysis of that debt model to say, based on, our current 600,000 in that street fund and our existing balance in that street improvement fund, if we want to, it's going to be a lot of how aggressive council wants to be on these projects. Are we to continue at the pace we're at currently? Do we look at potentially raising that amount, and then how we would want to go about financing that? So I think this is the first component of that tonight, as we get the feedback from you and kind of look at some of those prioritizations, and then we can look at some of those costs through the reconstructions versus the reclamations. As Mr. Erickson said, those are going to be less significant, some of those costs and assessments to our residents. But this is that first portion, and then we can bring the council back something to look at and to say, this is a 5-year plan, and then essentially looking at how aggressively and how quickly you want to do it.
Question, Councilwoman Nako Yeager. Is there enough money in that street improvement plan and then in that capital revolving fund to do mill and overlays in cash? Like if you wanted to do
for every mill and overlay, I guess we'd have to, Mr. Erickson, probably have to look at those mill and overlays. I mean, we have in this, between the two of them, balance roughly at the top of my head, I think there's a 1.34 million in that street fund, and then there's at least that, I think, in that capital revolving loan fund. I mean, that the street fund is obviously designated streets, and streets is an option on that capital revolving fund. So that would be, if that was something the council, as we get those numbers back in totality, if that was something the council wanted to look at for discussion, they could.
Because I'm seeing that big blue patch in Thornbeck Ponds, and I was wondering if, maybe next year, 2021, you do that as a mill and overlay.
So Councilmember Yeager, just looking at some of the preliminary estimates we have, that really large area that you're referring to, part of the Thornbeck there, we identified just over about $2 million. There's certainly, improvements that are above and beyond just the mill and the overlay, but there's a lot of issues with catch basins and settlements around catch basins and things of that nature that we've incorporated into that. There's also curb and gutter replacement. I think we've estimated a certain small percentage of curb and gutter that has failed, that is deteriorated or settled, that is not functioning the way it should, that we've accounted for replacement. So it's a little, it is a mill and overlay, but there's always these other improvements that we make sure we address when we're there. But we've identified that large area just to be a little over $2 million.
Oh, wow. Out of curiosity, how much would it be to reconstruct that?
I'm sure it's going to be at least double that. It's significant. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just trying to get a feel for the cost differences.
It's probably more than double that if we was a full reconstruction.
This is Mayor Iverson. I always want us to just be a little careful of throwing out numbers. And throwing out numbers is probably not the word for it, but stating numbers, especially when we don't know pricing as it goes out. Everything's so volatile. So it always gets me a little concerned until we start actually getting closer, drilling down into projects that we want to look at.
I think that's a fair statement for sure. I mean, these are extremely high level estimates at this stage of the game, and we need to do that. We need to have some numbers to start running some financial estimates and understand, how we're going to accommodate these type of improvements. But by no means are these very detailed estimates that have been put together.
All right, does council have any other further questions or directions? If not, Mr. Linwood, Mr. Erickson, Ms. Dumas, is there anything else that you would, oh, Mr. Aljug, I'll include everybody. Is there anything else that you need from council or any other discussion that you would like to have with us?
Mayor Iverson, I think Public Works Superintendent Almjo would like to kind of go over his maintenance plan and these upcoming years especially. And then Assistant City Administrator Dumas had pulled together that survey that I think she'd like some feedback from council as well. So Mr. Almjo, maybe if you want to start first on your maintenance component, you can explain to council your plan and then stand for those questions.
Sure, Rob. Yeah, Public Works is looking at 4 activities annually. And that first one would be the seal coat the streets with replay. Second is annual crack sealing. Third is annual street striping. And then the fourth was painting of crosswalks around the city. So we would start with Greenway and Faxton for our seal coat and crack filling. Currently, for street striping, we don't have an annual street striping plan. And so we put that number, these are all high estimates too. They're just estimates because there is no numbers out there. We just have footage. And so we did an estimate on that. And then crosswalks, we got the estimate. And that we try to keep all of them 3 activities into for the next 2 years at 90,000. And then the other 50,000 a year, we're looking at just overlays. And so overlays are, after you've seen the map that you've seen, the roads that are still left that are in really bad shape, we would just, as Public Works, we just go in with 1.5 inches to 2 inches of blacktop and do the whole road where we need it done. And it should last 7 to 10 years, sometimes 10 to 12, depending if it's a sand base in there. And so that 50,000 would be temporary patches, I would call it. And you can do approximately 1/2 mile of street. And so I like examples. So if you look at that map, when they're doing that whole area behind the drugstore and that, if you look at Finley Avenue, like the south side of 22, if you've been down there, you know that from 22 to them S curves is like one stretch of road that's really bad, and then it's good after that. And so, just if you can picture that, that costs like 27,000 to do that little stretch there, and that would just be an overlay. And then because it's not on this map yet, it would, be, say it's 10 years out or whatever the council comes up with a number, and so it would make it last till then, just to reduce the potholing on the road because we spend so much time on these roads. And that was kind of our plan, just to use the funds for the next 2 years that are there. And then we'd be back to the 100,000 annual maintenance fund. We did not seal coat last year, so we have an extra 80,000 in there. Any questions on that or?
Any questions from council? Doesn't seem like it. Thank you, Mr. Aljeld.
You bet, thank you.
I do have a question for everybody. Is everybody seeing this black bar across your screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, are we doing more of Mr. Amjeld or are we done? Because I did have some questions on other parts about the striping and the crosswalks. As in, why do they need, I mean, I understand why you want to make them visible and whatnot, but doesn't the paint last more than a year?
Generally with acrylic paint, it lasts, the snow plows scrape most of it off. And so
Okay.
usually you'll do it annually And my goal would be to, once we get the footage and the quantities, is to try to get some other cities to go jointly and get a better bid on striping every year and do it as a, 2-3 cities together.
Oh, okay.
That's a great idea, Mr. Eljud. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Linwood, do we want Ms. Dumas to speak next?
And I think if council has no more questions for Mr. Angel, Ms. Dumas
Oh.
certainly can.
I did have one more question about the replay sealant.
Yes.
How is that? How does that work? How is that superior to? Well, obviously, hopefully, it will not peel off like the chip sealing was. How is that? And more convenient than I would take it from fog sealing. But why this product? Why does this? What makes it superior? Besides soybean oil and 7 polymers.
Yeah, well, the soybean oil is green for one thing, and so it goes into the pavement 1.5 inches. Then it carries them polymers in there. Then it dries right away, and it seals the road. Like when you have to saw cut the road, you'll notice that when you saw cut it, it's very hard. The road is then, and it also improves the skid resistance. And there's been many studies done, including MnDOT research, and the city of Hutchinson. We went and visited. They use it all over their city, and the benefits are you can replay a road over fog seal after the fog seal wears off, but you cannot put replay over steel coat chips, and so it won't penetrate. So you can replay. Like say you want to get 20 years before a mill and overlay,
Yeah.
you replay, then you can replay, and then you can put chip seals down then and get 25 years, say, out of before you do a mill and overlay. So you can always add chip seals later if you want to do the last 7 years with chip seals. And it's a very good product. I've used it in the city of Victoria, and I have a list of references. If anybody would like to call any of them.
Oh, okay. Well, not call them, but anybody local around here using it?
I have St. Francis, Victoria, Laconia, Hutchinson, Ham Lake, Plymouth, MnDOT, and Bird Island is what I had on my list.
Thanks.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? If not, Ms. Dumas, did you want to talk about the survey that you had pulled together?
Absolutely, thank you. So this is, you'll see in the packet, there is a draft survey for residents that we're wanting to put out on the Polco platform, which is the same platform that we had used for the residential COVID and business surveys. So the reports that you'll get back on the responses will look very similar. But this survey is really meant to get a sense of kind of residential feedback on the condition of our streets. So the survey has a couple different focuses, looking at street conditions, walkability, how safe people feel on our streets, street lighting, sidewalks, and then some questions about funding. So these questions we're hoping to kind of provide some context and inform some of the decisions which are part of our kind of long-term planning for our street maintenance program. And we wanted to kind of bring this to you to see if there was anything, any feedback that you had about the survey before we sent it out to residents, if there was anything missing, anything you wanted to change. And with that, I'll take questions.
Council, we can go around the room again. Member Schilling. All right, we'll go Member Luker. Any questions?
Yeah, just a couple. When do you anticipate sending this out? When does it close? And how, I guess, substantially do you anticipate this impacting policy?
So when we send it out, all of the people who have taken Polko surveys in the past will get an email that says, hey, there's another survey from the city of Wyoming. So currently we have 47 people who are in our membership who would receive that. And so that hopefully would initiate a rather significant immediate response rate. And so we could send the survey out as soon as tomorrow. And then the 2 surveys that we did for POCO previously, we had those public for 2 weeks. And so I envision having, it could be 2 to 4 weeks, probably somewhere in there. Depending if you have any feedback on that, we can adjust that. But I think one thing with surveys is usually don't get a ton of people at the later points in the survey. So it's better to kind of do an initial push and maybe a reminder so people don't get annoyed we don't want to annoy people with reminders about taking the survey. And in terms of how it might affect policy, that's really up to you all. This is meant as an information tool to help provide context on the questions that we ask. And so I think if there's any questions about or policy questions that you're really wanting more residential feedback on, that's one of the things we want to make sure that we're including.
All right. Anything else, Member Luker? No? Okay. All right. We did have a lengthy discussion on this. Was it the last meeting, Ms. Dumas, or the one before? Or the one before that? I can't remember. Time goes really different right now. So, but I know there was a lengthy discussion on this, and you answered quite a few questions during that time. So I know I don't have any questions with it. I think that as our city and our residents get acquainted with this type of engagement, you're going to see more people involved with it, and they're going to know that their information is not sold anywhere. It's not used for anything. We don't track them, that sort of thing. We just go by their answers. So I'm hoping you'll see a higher return rate on that, and really appreciate what you're doing. It's really starting to be some of the best engagements that we've had with our city, and getting those feedback. So appreciate that. Member Yeager, do you have questions?
No.
All right. And Member Schilling was saying he's having a little bit of issue with his volume. So he can always pop in chat if he needs to, and I can answer or ask his questions for him.
I think I'm back.
There you go.
Yeah, I was talking that whole time and then you moved on and I'm like, why is this not off?
Technology. What do you
Yeah.
have, Mr. Schilling?
I was just going to say, when I read through the package with these 9 questions, I think they're really to the point. I think it leaves it in an area that I think will answer the way we want it to be answered. So the only thing I could think of is maybe adding something, but at this time I couldn't add anything to them questions. I think they're outstanding. I think it's a good job on the survey, in my opinion. So.
Thank you.
All right, great. Mr. Linwood, you're back on again.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's the feedback, we wanted. I think Ms. Dumas did a really nice job explaining it. And, once again, this is a component for the council to use. It's not going to set your policy, but it's a tool in the tool shed, and hopefully we'll get some good feedback where you can get some analysis from it and help you make some decisions as we move forward in this, both council and staff.
Okay. I do have one more question for Mr. Erickson and possibly for council. We kind of moved on, but it triggered a thought with this questionnaire. Mr. Erickson, is there a way to relatively quickly or in the next report maybe have an idea of some streets that we might want to look at for more walkability or more biking or more friendly, what I want to say, neighborhood friendly travel? And I'm not looking at cost or anything like that, but how hard would it be to identify some places where we might be able to increase the walkability of our city?
Yes, we definitely can do that at a really high level. We certainly can do that. The next city council meeting is Tuesday, so council packets, I think, go out Friday. I'm not sure we can have it ready for that, but we certainly could for that first meeting in June. If you'd like to see that, we certainly could prepare some information related to that.
And maybe that's even a component that we have for our next work session on this topic, where we have that in that, so we have that to look at, as well as some of those potential costs as council's kind of identified some of those priorities. We put that together, some of those areas where there could be some walkability or sidewalks added to where currently there are not.
Yeah, that would be great. And even the proximity to parks and stuff as we grow with our development, it might be kind of good to at least take a look at what that could be, or start heading into that direction, as long as we're kind of doing some comp plans and all that kind of stuff within the city.
Sure.
Great.
I have a question, Madam Mayor. This is Councilwoman Yanko Yeager. When you talk about walkability, like I noticed on like my street, Galen Drive, walkability has been decreased since the road project, because now it's so narrow you have to jump out of the way for when a car comes. Could that be included, or is that because the street was already reconstructed, nothing can be done, or I don't know, just asking.
Sure. To go back in a potential area that's been reconstructed, and mean like add a sidewalk or increase
I don't know about, I mean, I'm open to whatever walkability would be.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Oh, that's you. Whatever walkability would be defined as. I just
Okay.
know from observation, there are some
Okay.
streets that now that they're narrower, you're kind of jumping out of the way.
Sure. And I think Mr. Erickson can maybe reference that, but I know that particular stretch, the as well, the 2020 project, some of the streets that were larger have been brought down to a smaller portion. And I know some of that back where you are, Councilmember Yeager, I think was due to drainage and the levels that need to be up. But Mr. Erickson, maybe you could chime in on some of that, because I think maybe there was some more thoughtfulness into that, and how maybe that walkability component can or cannot be added, maybe with, I think, some of the street levels and grading that's gone on with that project.
Yeah, I think, rural section roadways that don't have curb and gutter typically require, drainage swales to accommodate the drainage that flows off of the roadway. And so there's certainly a lot of areas that are conducive to adding a trail. Whether there's appropriate right of way there or not is a significant impact. A lot of our roadways in the community, we just have rights by prescription, particularly in the township area, the former township area, where we really don't have the ability to add trails without acquiring right of way. And then there's other areas that are really conducive for that. And I think the mayor's comment to look at available areas and where that makes sense, we can certainly do that and look at that. But I think a number of areas that were in the 2015 project really had areas with swales and drainage. And by the time, we just simply don't have the right of way to do that. The trails can't go in the back slope or the forest slope of the ditch or the bottom of the ditch. And so they require, to be outside of that area, which oftentimes put them outside of the public right of way that the city has control of. And so we can certainly look at and evaluate all of those areas. Some of the reconstruction areas might be conducive to adding trails, and others certainly from the knowledge that I have, I know are not. So we can certainly evaluate that and look at those areas.
Okay, but with walkability, does it have to be confined to an engineering solution? Can the solution be simply lowering a speed limit, slowing things down? Does it, are we just talking simply engineering solutions, or can we broaden the definition of walkability and the solutions?
Well, no, certainly, walkability. If there's not if it's on road walking, certainly, that can be done anywhere, and it's just a matter of wanting to make sure that that's done in a safe environment. And oftentimes that's not. They are, typically separated in some fashion, but there are on-street facilities. People utilize roadways that don't have trails, particularly in neighborhoods, quite often. And so we can certainly look at that as well and talk about speeds. And we're still waiting to hear back on the ability to change speeds. And so we know we have that right, but there's a working group talking about that, a consultant, and MnDOT, League of Minnesota Cities, City Engineers Association of Minnesota are working on some guidance on that. I haven't heard anything recently on that, and I certainly can check in on that. But yeah, we can incorporate all those type of things for discussion.
Okay.
All right, sorry to throw that in late and end of meeting here, but I was gonna say that and then kind of lost track. So, all right, is there anything else, Mr. Linwood, that you need council to discuss at this work session?
No, I think we got everything that we had hoped to get. So we appreciate the direction from council, and yeah, thanks for your time tonight.
All right, we miss everybody. It's good to at least see faces on Zoom, but I'm looking forward to being back in chambers and actually being together as a group. So take care. And with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting, and we will see you next Tuesday at council. Actually, it'll be by, it's not going to be in person, right, Mr. Linwood? We're still doing.
Depending upon the order, but most likely due to the size of our group, it'll probably be electronic.
Okay, sounds great. We'll see everybody next Tuesday. Take care.
Have a great
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.